content.
Welcome back to Weird Things Happen at Midnight. Oh, wrong show.
Yes, welcome back to Corner Macabre, and we have an exciting special episode, right?
Yes. We have Ash Hamilton, and we have
Stephen Taylor.
I worked with Stephen for 3 or 4 weeks on a picture, and so these gentlemen have this movie called Effed, which we have watched.
Yes.
And thank you for sending a screener.
Yes, they were kind enough to send us a screening of it, so we got to enjoy it early on. And so that was super exciting. I love getting the chance to do that, so we really appreciate that from you guys.
Yes, and I love this movie. But what I love about this movie the most is the story that Stephen told me of how you even came up with this whole thing, Ash. And I want our listeners to hear this, because it's an amazing way to make a film, honestly, and everyone has to watch this film because of this.
The biopic will be called Skullduggery, or how I came to make a horror anthology. So interestingly, I had made a feature-length movie that I had written and directed and also starred in, called Holes in the Sky, and that was strangely enough, that was the culmination of having a couple projects just fall through that didn't end up happening. And those were projects that had quite a bit of money behind them, had a little bit of studio involvement, and it was just sort of like the perfect storm or the perfect, shitstorm, as it were.
Yeah.
Where it was just pre-COVID. Like, we were trying to do this big movie pre-COVID with a big cast, and it was like every time we did something, the universe stepped in and was just like, like the Jurassic Park gif, like every time. And it was supposed to be this exploitation film about this sect of warrior nuns that had been placed, what they thought was going to be like the battle between, good and evil. But it just so happens that it was going to take place at a rural Canadian strip club called the Beaver Dam.
Oh my God.
And there was this saint, this weird Canadian offshoot of the Catholic Church, but this saint was their prophet. He wasn't really all that good or all that accurate. So the information he gave them was about 6 years too soon. So all these girls are at the strip club for about 6 years. And by the time we get around to telling the story, they're pretty much all strung out. And they can't even really remember what their job was supposed to be. They've been undercover for so long that now their undercover persona, sort of their real persona. And it's about what then does happen, if the Antichrist shows up. So we had this really big cast. And we had some really cool cameos. We had some sort of well-known people, and this was right at the time too before Ron Jeremy got exposed for everything that happened with him. Like, he was part of the cast. It was just every time we added something to the cast, again, it was the universe saying, "Oh, no, we don't think this movie's going to happen." So, and everyone tells you, like, hey, don't take it seriously, don't take it personally. This is just the business. So the first thing you do is you take it seriously and you take it personally.
Yeah.
And you spiral into an absolutely horrible depression and try to claw your way out of it. And basically my first film was this attempt to crawl my way out of it, because I said, we're always writing films that we have a specific budget in mind, whether it's 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever, micro budget. Let's write something for no budget at all. Let's write something that we could do with our own equipment. And I had taught film for years, and it's been a big part of my tool set. So I have a lot of equipment, have always had a lot of equipment. So flattening that curve was relatively easy. And we said, let's make this movie. So we made a movie, and it ended up doing really, really well. We got into a bunch of festivals, won a bunch of awards, ended up getting global distribution for it. It's done really, really well on streaming so far. But, as anyone knows, like, it's sort of playing a one-man band when you're doing something like that. You're wearing 1,000 different hats, and each one of those hats is X amount of hours a week. And, what ends up happening is that you sort of have to straddle this line where you're not completely burnt out, but you're always a little bit burnt out. Like, so you've got to be just a bit of an addict, but not a total addict, and that's sort of like that weird razor's edge that you live on. And I knew that with the success of the prior film, it's sort of a strike with iron is hot kind of thing. You got to follow it up with something. You have to sort of remain relevant. You have to keep something, in channel. And I didn't really want to take on the full responsibility of writing another feature, casting another feature, more than likely having to be in it just out of necessity. And I know a bunch of filmmakers. I, have ran a horror site for about 12 years. I've done various different podcasts, promoted a lot of films. And in doing that, I've befriended a lot of other directors, a lot of other filmmakers. So the idea was, yeah, let's make a feature, but I am not really in the headspace to write and direct a full feature. I don't really want to try to get the money for a full feature. But what if we did an anthology? What if we got a hold of directors and said, hey, listen, let's do an anthology. I want to put this idea forward and see what you think of it. And if so, you can do this sort of carte blanche. You can do it on your own time, as long as thematically we know what we're trying to do and we try to adhere to that, even if it's loosely. And then we'll see what we can do about, putting all together and making into a film that, I wanted an anthology that was a little more coherent, that did sort of rely on the other stories, but not so much that if one failed, it would, drag the others down. And anthologies are really sort of a mixed bag like that. And it's a very subjective experience, I think, even more so than a typical feature, because you'll have elements people really, really like in one segment, and then maybe they really don't like in another. And how do you keep, as with everything, how do you keep asses in seats? Like, how do you keep them thoroughly entertained through the whole thing? So, the idea was like, we have to do something where there's some reliance on the other segments in a way that there's an overarching story. And that was sort of the thing that we wanted, but at the same time, it was, how do we make a feature without going into even more debt, without even trying to, scrounge for money, which is always a thing with indie film, without totally killing ourselves. And by the way, I did totally kill myself on it. But anyways, in the beginning, it was that I wasn't going to do that. And that was part of the appeal.
And then he was like, let's just do this again.
Yeah. I'm like, let's just see if I can't totally lose my sanity. So that was sort of the idea, was like, let's get another feature going. Let's get it done relatively quickly. And let's not really kill ourselves. And I've always been a fan of anthologies too. I love Creepshow. I love episodic anthologies like Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt. I'm a bigger Rod Serling guy, Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, anything like that. So the idea wasn't something that just totally sprang from being a cheap ass. It was, the cheap ass element was there, mind you, but like the other idea was this is something that I enjoyed the idea of at the same time. So that's sort of how it came to pass. And it sort of came to pass even, well, in the beginning, like, easier than we thought, because it was like, oh, we got this contributor. This person's excited. This person's excited. And then we sort of move forward that way, and then, of course, you curse yourself in the day that you ever wanted to make film. But it comes a little bit later. Yeah.
Was the idea for it from the start for your anthology to be kind of all surrounding about kind of the end of times or end of days, or did you guys kind of go through a number of ideas for your anthology?
We were so lazy, that was basically the first one. It was like, we all didn't hate it, and we're like, okay,
this will work.
Let's just run with this, because we're all not hating it. And I think originally too, like, Steve and I had talked about this idea that I sort of wanted something where there's like absolutely no happy endings. like across the board, there's no happy endings, and not that we're purposefully writing that way, but it was just, do we have a storyline that will steer us in that direction? And of course, it was like, well, let's not do something where people are trying to avoid the end of the world. Let's not do something where, because you always in bigger movies, you're always paired up with like, this ex special forces guy who just happens to have the answer, or someone with an old book, or someone with a family curse, or like there's always something where there's an antipode, or there's some kind of balance. And I didn't want that balance at all. I'm like, no, nobody's getting out of this for the most part. We're just seeing how these situations go down independently, of one another. And I think that sort of appealed to everyone too. This idea of, well, we can get a little bit nasty and it'll make sense. It won't just be nasty for nasty's sake. Like it literally is the end of the world. I mean, it's, if we get a little, down and dirty with it, it's sort of expected. So that I think was a big thing too. And I like the idea of putting people in the middle of it, not the events preceding so much, but let's put people in as this world is unraveling, how these people are dealing with it in their own different ways.
Yeah, and they deal with it. Yeah, and some better than others. But
Right.
I want to touch upon the end for just a minute. I'm not going to give anything away, but remember in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are watching FBI, and here comes Rick Dalton. All right, that whole thing. That is the end of this film. I was like sitting watching this, and I'm like, oh yes, oh God, yes, I love the ending.
That's the action we're looking for.
For the ending,
I think that, like, one thing that really, and anyways, to me, I love it when you watch a movie that obviously this isn't a universal picture, but I don't think that it veers horribly far from the quality of a studio film. We tried to do, what we could with it. But this idea where I think if you're not watching an $80 million movie or a $20 million movie or something, like you don't expect any real payoffs an awful lot, like visually. Like you're always expecting, like, oh, okay, well, we're going to cut to this, or this is going to happen, or this is going to happen. And this is their way that they're going to imply all this happening without having to throw it at the audience. And they can get away with that, and they can get away with it on a budget. And we sort of took that and went, okay, well, what if we threw everything at the audience absolutely possible, so that by the time they're done with the end of the movie, they probably will have seen a lot of things they didn't expect to see.
oh yeah,
Like, I know I'm being very vague, but it's like,
yeah.
if they're sitting there thinking, we're not going to see this, or we're not going to see that, or this is a little indie movie, they're not going to show us that. We wanted to take that and go, okay, let's just make a bucket list and cross off all this shit that we don't expect people are gonna see, and let's just give it as much of it as absolutely possible to them. Of course, then you wind up at 3:00 in the morning, making like maquettes and miniatures and stuff, going, why? Why did we choose to do this?
Because
be as
you
possible.
can. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the stories in this is it's like a wraparound story. I mean, it is the wraparound story. It's the journalist played by Kayla Meyer, and who I've worked with before.
You talked about the ending, about contingency, and then the interweaving story we keep coming back to with her. Now, Ash, I know you directed the contingency one for sure. Did you do all of those scenes with Corinne and that whole storyline?
Yeah, we did the opening with Lasardo, and we did all of those interstitials, the interweaving segments, and then the end segment. Yeah.
When you got all of the directors together and writers, directors, was there any back and forth with you and them as to, like, would they send you their script and you say yes or change this, or was there any of that, or did you just let them have free reign?
I basically said, I gave them my script. Just because I said, I don't think we want to do anything too similar. So if someone was, and now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why in their right minds would they try to do what we did? But anyways, like back then, it was like, I wanted to make sure that we were all sort of complimenting each other, but at the same time, there wasn't any huge, redundancy. And it flowed pretty well, actually. They would call me and say, hey, this is the idea that I have. And I would say, great. I think that sounds great. And we were very lucky that we had a group of directors that, although these are all horror directors and people who love the genre, we got some very different, um, emotionally grounded, and I think different in the level of horror and the level of, unease or whatever from each and every one of them. And that worked out really well. So there wasn't a lot of going back and forth. The only thing that happened was we had one director attached who was a personal friend of mine who I really, really wanted involved. And they shot a segment and it sort of got erased.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that was a bit of damage control, like on everyone's part, to sort of scramble and go, what are we going to do now? We're down a segment. But, luckily we were able to, to bounce back and find a guy and find something that we really liked. But that was, a moment of blind panic.
Yeah. My favorite segment out of the whole film was the grandmother one.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma. Yep.
That is so unnerving. It's just creepy.
Yeah, it is very creepy. Again, we don't want to give anything away,
Right,
but I did very much appreciate the cheese grater. I like the grandma one. What I enjoy is I like when I watch a film. I like to be reminded of other horror films, but I don't want it to ever be like, oh, they're clearly ripping something off. And I feel like in every sequence of this, I was getting a little sprinkle of this, a little sprinkle of that.
Right.
And I appreciate how individual each segment kind of is in its own story, and it's very much its own thing in tone. But it is still all in this, quasi-connected end of the world universe going on. But the grandma one very much gave me
Goosebumps.
but it reminded me of those found footage type of zombie things like Record and things of that nature. I did enjoy that one. I'm hard pressed to say which one was actually my favorite, but I think honestly the one that surprised me the most and how much I ended up appreciating it was Apocalypse Eve, the one with the couple that are kind of like on the run. And I think the reason is because of that is because it was kind of this quiet, almost beautiful story in the midst of all of this chaos.
Right.
We had this kind of standalone, I don't know if you want to call it a love story necessarily, because they're already together. It was an interesting little reprieve in the midst of everything going on that I think just kind of maybe caught me off guard. And so I really enjoyed that segment a lot.
That one was the replacement. That was the one that we ended up having to go find.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I think it worked out to a lot of large degrees because, Grandma was directed by Dylan Brown, which is a very effective piece. It's great that we have that, but we don't have another segment trying to do that.
Right.
The same way with Apocalypse Eve, we don't have another segment trying to do that. And we've got these things that I guess, they sort of circle horror in different paths and different journeys and their gravity and where they come to that genre and different subgenres definitely varies. And I'm glad that it worked out that way. Because it allows each piece to definitely have its own strength. I don't think, unfortunately, that Grandma would have been effective if we would have had another piece that was tonally, similar.
Right.
Same way with Apocalypse Eve, and definitely, the Apocalypse Smells Like Cookies. To have something that had a lot of humor, again, would have been sort of difficult to pair with other segments. And even, ours, if we went more, horror action, which is sort of what, we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. When we took a step back, we were like, oh, we do have these different identities, luckily, where I think, horror fans are going to be able to come in and go, I attach myself to this because this is sort of my preference. I attach myself to this because this is my preference.
Right.
And you can have a lot of wide-ranging preferences that I think will come in and enjoy it because of the lack of similarities, which I think is maybe a pretty good strength for this film.
I agree.
I think the Apocalypse Smells Like Cookies was a really effective start to the film as a whole. Not that the rest of it is anywhere near as comedy heavy. I mean, you do get some comedy relief from Corinne's character, the newscaster, but it was kind of like a nice palate cleanser at the beginning to like give you that comedy horror aspect, and then kind of throw you into the deep end of the pool with all the shit going on. Specifically with anthologies, when I go to watch an anthology, I always think about it as like kind of like listening to a new album for music. I'm a big music guy too, and like it's really important to set like the tone and really catch your viewer with the very first song or the very first segment. So I think it's super effective that really does that in F, because something maybe not quite as catching or entertaining, or maybe if it would have been a straight up serious piece, it may have not have caught the viewer quite. Of course, I can't speak for anybody else seeing the film, obviously, but I think that was a really effective start. So kudos on all that, because that immediately got me, kind of ready and excited for the rest of the movie, regardless of what I was, what I was going to be subjected to throughout the runtime. That was a really excellent start to it, and actually funny. Like I actually laughed a couple times, which comedy and horror is very, very, very hard to do, and so. When it's actually done effectively, kudos to that, because it just sometimes it falls really flat and it just fucking sucks.
There's people that say American Werewolf in London is a comedy horror movie. No, it's a horror movie.
Yeah,
it's just, and John Landis will tell you the same thing. But I want to ask both of you, and we'll answer my question too. Out of 2024, what's your best horror movie from 2024 thus far?
I'll let Steve go first, because mine will be largely divisive.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's funny because the only thing I can think of is the latest one I saw. I just finally watched Trap, and I enjoyed it. It's more of a thriller, I guess, but I can't think of what else. I guess there hasn't been anything that's really, really stood out for me this year. Yeah.
I haven't seen that yet. M. Night Shyamalan, right? Yeah.
I think Josh Hartnett was amazing in it. He just nailed creepy serial killers.
Josh Hartnett's good in everything he does.
We've touched on Josh in a couple of episodes. Yeah. He's one of those actors that he just does not get the love that he so greatly deserves. I think he's extremely underrated, especially in the horror genre. I really like him as an actor. So I'm excited. I haven't seen Trap yet, so I'm excited to see it.
So yeah. So what about you, Ash?
Okay. So I think one of the reasons that I like this movie so much was because my expectations were actually really low. Even though it has all the elements that should have my expectations really high. I really, really liked Alien Romulus for a lot of different reasons. I like Fede Alvarez. I think he's got a really great brain for pacing. I think he's got a really great brain for suspense. And I think he's got a really good approach to paying homage to things without trying to be overly clever at times. And I think sometimes that's where a lot of these sort of reboots or reimaginings of franchises fall short. And I don't think Romulus is a perfect film by any means, but I think what it gets right sets a really good return for the Alien franchise. And it got those elements so right that I think that we see people willing to spend money on Alien again. And that's one thing that I really loved about it, was this idea of, no, this is someone that wants you to enjoy an Alien movie for it being close to Alien, and for it having elements of Aliens, and for it having elements of Covenant and Prometheus. It had those elements in just the right doses, I felt, that I came out of it satisfied. And it's been a long time, I think, since I thought of that franchise as being that satisfying. So that, to me, it did what I didn't think it was going to do.
Yeah.
So that, to me, really, really impressed me. I really, really liked Alien Romulus.
Yeah, it is. It's very divisive. Craig and I went to it opening night, and I literally walked out of the theater like, what just happened?
Very, very love-hate relationship starting out with it.
Yeah, it was.
Me too.
I think,
but it's real. It has really grown on me.
yeah,
Because I didn't know what to expect, because I saw a trailer. I saw the teaser for it, and I saw the first trailer for it. I'm like, I don't want to watch anything else. I want to go in blind.
Yeah.
And I love the callbacks that are in it. When the credits start rolling, I'm like, what the fuck was that? I just didn't know. I didn't know if I liked it, hated it, was about it. I didn't know. But I'm definitely going to watch it again when it comes out streaming, because there's things about it I absolutely love, and there's things about it that I'm like, I love Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I love both of them, and the callbacks that they had to both of those is I was like, oh, do they work in this world now? Do they? And that's why I want to watch it again. Because I know what it is now, and I can embrace it. Because Craig, he's seen it twice now, and well, you talk about it.
Yeah, I felt the same way the first time. Coming out of the second time, I was like, okay, I like it. Like the only thing that I wasn't fully on board with, and still wasn't at the end of the day, was it all comes down to creative choices. I don't think anything about the movie was poorly done by any way, shape or form. I just not in love with the ending and the creature, at the end. But again, I think part of that is me. I don't have a problem with Prometheus or Covenant and like going back, in the franchise and starting that all over. But I think there's just such a large part of me that's such a fan of the original basis of Alien and Aliens that I'm kind of like, all right, we did the Prometheus and the Covenant thing. Like, I'm ready to move on. Like, I'm ready to be done with that. Pepper it in here and there. Like, I was all about the stuff they were doing with Rook, not Ash, but Rook.
Yeah.
And like talking about what they had done and, messed with the fluid and things like that. So I was all about interjecting that into the franchise, but then ending back with the creature. And I think it comes down to the creature design. Although it was pure nightmare fuel.
Oh, yeah, it was.
I was kind of like, I don't know. But being such a fan of the franchise, there are so many things that I was like, man, I'm so happy to enjoy Alien.
Oh, yeah.
Again.
I think a long time. I think it brings us to a point where we can start exploring the idea of Alien in a way that's closer to the original intentions, but still expanding on that universe. I think that we've had the very fundamental Alien and Aliens, which dealt with themes that, were again sister themes, but just on different scales. And then we go all the way to Prometheus and Covenant, which, are largely exploratory sci-fi films. Thematically, those films are, there's a philosophy behind those films. I mean, they're almost theological in the way that they approach the mythology. And then we go to Romulus, and Romulus says, okay, I can exist in this universe with all these other concepts, And what I don't have to do is I don't have to degrade or denigrate what had come before me. I can take it and maybe not have it a huge element or have it a small element, because I think what ends up happening is, I mean, especially when you take a look at fandom and the toxicity of fandom, is that certain directors will come in and they're like, oh, I know the fans don't like this bit, so I'm going to poke fun at it. And it didn't do that, but it had an opportunity to do that. And, I don't want, and again, I'm that guy that I like existing in a world where I can both like and dislike Star Wars films. I like that there's enough there that I can cherry pick what I love and what I don't love.
Yeah. I will take, with Star Wars or the Alien franchise or any franchise I love, even if it's complete and utter shit, I will still take it because it's still being made. It's still being produced. It's still out there. I can still go enjoy it or hate it either way. But as long as I'm getting the content, but I just don't want it to die.
I love being toxic.
Oh,
I think that's awesome.
I mean, every once in a while, I love to put in Halloween Resurrection. I mean, it's absurd. It's stupid.
No,
I still watch it.
There's a lot of horror that I know is bad, and that I know is not even intentionally bad. Like there's the kind that has self-awareness. If you're looking at Trauma or films similar to that, where you're like, oh, you know what they're doing. Obviously, this is a spoof or parody. Then there are other films that really did, shoot for the sky and face planted hard against the ceiling, and I still like those too. Like I really do, and I think it also is. I think it's a distance thing. Strangely, I think like the more you get removed from some of this stuff, you can go back to it and go, that wasn't really horrible. I don't know why I hated that as much as I did the first time I saw it. Or you come to understand that it's that band that puts out that weird sort of theme album, and you're like, why did they do that? Because all you're wanting was this album full of fucking bangers. But then you go back to that album and you're like, well, I kind of like that album because they were trying something different, and it might not have hit the mark, but at least they were throwing some darts. They weren't just walking up to the board and and sticking it in the 100. Like they knew exactly what they were doing, and that there was a huge chance it was going to fail. And they did it anyways. I kind of respect that. I mean, I think I'd rather do stuff that maybe doesn't quite hit, but it makes people think, or at least gives people something a little bit different, as opposed to I'm going to make the same slasher film 1,000 times, and I love slasher movies. I really do, but I realize that there's really not a whole lot in that for me to do. And I kind of respect that idea. And I think that's probably why I liked Romulus as much as I did, just because it was he went for it, regardless of whether he appeased the fans or whatever. I mean, I don't think that you can say that it was a lazy or boring effort, no matter what you think of it.
Oh no, not at all.
And
nothing lazy about that.
No. And the more I think about it, I mean, there's no way to make that film and everybody love it. It's just not possible.
Right.
What I think Fede did was make the best bridge, and maybe the perfect bridge, between what they were trying to do with Prometheus and Covenant, and bridge that gap, bringing it into the franchise of that we know and love with Alien and Aliens, and further on. And I just don't think there's a way to perfectly do that without not enjoying every single aspect of it.
So my favorite horror film of 2024 was Longlegs, until I watched Oddity.
Oh, I really liked Oddity.
Oddity was really good. The horror was so subtle in it.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't subtle. The aftermath of the kills in it is and I keep telling Craig, you need to watch it. You need to watch it. It's so good. It's so good.
It really is good. It's a great watch.
Yeah, and I was surprised, but I didn't know anything about it. I saw a trailer for it. I'm like, it's like the Creep Show 2, Wooden Indian. Like, oh, how's that scary?
Oh
Well,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I really dug that movie, and we did a whole podcast of me explaining to Craig why he should watch that movie, and then you did the whole podcast of a movie I should never watch.
Yeah, we did an episode on we were wanting to do it, and we had free time to do an episode, and we didn't really know what to do, so we just decided to do an episode of, one of us had seen a movie that the other one should see, and one of us had seen a movie the other shouldn't see. So we did that. So he had watched Oddity, and obviously I needed to watch it. I still need to, and I'll definitely get there. But I went and saw The Crow in the theater, and so I had to. I mean, teach their own, obviously, but I had to tell Randy about how if he would watch that movie, it'd be one of the worst decisions he could ever make.
Yeah, the original Crow with Brandon Lee has such a special place in my heart. So, and I think it's the fact that, I mean, it strays so much from that movie, from what I understand, but they use Eric and Shelley as the name of the characters, which is like sacrilegious.
Have you guys seen the Crow from this year?
I started watching it.
You say started.
I guess I'm just like a closet self-loather. Yeah, it was a movie.
I don't think it's been a long time since I've actively struggled that hard to get through a movie. I think it was, yeah.
I lost that struggle.
I'm not even gonna struggle. I will never watch that movie. Never.
So my favorite so far for the year. We still have some time left, before the year's over.
Yeah.
I really hate to choose. I don't have anything against wide release films. It's just on average, wide release horror films are few and far in between, and especially good ones.
Mm-hmm.
But so far this year, Long Legs for me has been the main contender for my favorite film of the year. I'm obsessed with the fact that we've had a string of wide release good horror films, and not just good ones, like real good ones. Yeah. And Long Legs, I just wasn't prepared for in any way, shape, or form. And I'm a big Nick Cage fan, and I always defend him all the time. Can he get crazy and out of control? Absolutely. But I think Long Legs was kind of a film to like throw back in everybody's face and be like, no, you know what? Like, he just scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, and
it's very, very minuscule amount of screen time, and I loved everything about the film tonally, everything that happened, every aspect of the movie. I just was really in tune with it and just absolutely fell in love with it. So that's been my favorite one so far.
I would say that you could watch our review of it, but it got flagged, it got tagged, YouTube pulled it down. And it's because I go into a full-on Nicolas Cage in the review.
I'm not sure why yet. We got pinged for copyright and copyright infringement. We didn't have anything that would be.
Yeah.
But anyway, that got pulled down. But nonetheless, I do have another question for you guys, if you don't mind. Just because I like asking any filmmaker guests that we have this question. I always want to know if you were given the full beans, like if you were given all the money you needed, any crew, actors, the whole shebang, what would be your dream project?
Steve, I would
fantasy.
I would probably try to do a really faithful adaptation of Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. It's one of my favorite books.
Hell yeah.
And
That's
awesome. I think that there are aspects of the Will Smith one that I did really like. Just as there were aspects of Last Man on Earth that I really liked, aspects of the Mega Man that I really liked. But there are themes in the book that seems to be like slam dunks, that they didn't use. that it's like, oh man, it's like there's so much still that's very, in my opinion, very fertile in that book, and the ending is so brutal, so absolutely brutal that no one's really sort of touched upon that yet. That if someone was just throwing money at me, I'd be like, wow, yeah, we're doing a I Am Legend movie, obviously.
Yeah, that's like me with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm looking forward to Del Toro's Frankenstein, but still, I know it's not going to be up to my standard of what that story is and what that story should be.
I know.
Yeah.
I thank you guys so much for actually taking the time to do this with us and answering our questions. We absolutely
it was great. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Extremely grateful for you guys letting us screen the movie early, and even more grateful that you came on and wanted to chat with us about the film and about other stuff. So thank you so much for joining us. It's just a pleasure.
We had a great time. I had a blast. Thank you.
It's
excellent.
Good to see you again, Steve Farrell.
Always.
All right. Well, that'll be it.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys. We really appreciate it. Have
Thanks
a good
so
one.
much. Have a great night.